Hello, Aubrey. How's it going today?
I'm great, Lindsay. I have a question for you.
Yes,
When
ready.
is the last time you had a really good conversation?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I guess I had some good conversations this past weekend. We ran a race up in the mountains and we had a really nice lunch with a couple of friends and
Nice.
just, yeah, got into some good stuff. But
Oh,
what
I
about you,
love to
Aubrey?
hear it because it would be a bummer if you're like, I feel like it's been a while, maybe 6 months. No, we don't want that,
6
right?
months.
I,
No.
I have them at least weekly because we have open conversation club
Oh,
with
yeah.
anyone in any of our courses, and it's always a fantastic conversation. I love it. We use really fun conversation starters,
Oh,
learning great
awesome.
things about them, and so yeah, I'm
That's
lucky that way.
amazing. Oh, wow.
Yes.
That is amazing that, we have a chance to meet our students every week, the students in our courses. And I just can't wait to meet more students. Tonight we have our
Yes.
fluency party, which I'm
Yes.
super excited about.
I know.
Yes.
I hope all of you listening, everyone in our courses are able to attend. So I hope you guys listening are going to be there. So they're so fun.
Yes.
But
Yes.
the reason
Okay.
I brought this up,
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you about conversation because I recently heard a mistake where an English learner said conversate instead of converse because they were
Yes.
taking conversation and trying to turn it into a verb. Oh, these problems with prefixes and suffixes. It's so easy to think you can follow a pattern and
Yeah.
add a certain suffix, but a lot of verbs break the rules. English is tricky that way, right?
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes we can't follow a pattern. I have actually heard
Yeah.
native speakers make that mistake as well, though.
I
So
have too.
no
I've
hard
heard
feelings.
conversate from natives. True, you're right. This can be, yeah, natives make this mistake as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. So then in that case, we're getting into what element of speech then today, Aubrey? What is the
Yes.
your
We're talking about
grammatical term?
suffixes. Yes,
Mm,
suffixes which are at the end of the word. A prefix comes at the beginning of the word, like pre, un, non, and then suffixes
nice.
come at the end, like
Excellent.
ion, ness, ation, right? All of these chunks that we add to the end of the word, often to convert like an adjective to a noun. But the
Yes.
problem in English is there are some sort of patterns, but a lot of words break these patterns. So we're going to tell you the best way to learn these and use them correctly. And today we're going to highlight a few common mistakes we hear with them.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just dive right into the first category then, Aubrey. But first, before we do that, I do want to remind our listeners to hit that follow button. Aubrey, why should they be following All Ears English?
Yes. Well, first of all, because this is a two-part series. When
Yes.
I planned this, the next day I heard another student error with ness, the
Oh,
suffix
interesting.
ness. So we're going to do a part two focusing on that
Good.
one. But always, you don't want to miss any of these amazing episodes. So be sure to hit follow, guys.
All right, hit that follow button and if you're on YouTube watching this, which you could be, it could give you a whole different experience of All Ears English. You would go ahead and hit subscribe. All right, so hit the right button,
Awesome.
guys, and come back for the next part of this episode, next part of this series. Aubrey, where to go first? Where should we go?
Yeah. So we have a few sort of pro tips for the exceptions today, right? You may have learned some patterns in as you're learning, but our first one is you can't always drop ion. So for
Okay.
example, for many nouns, we drop the suffix ion and then it becomes a verb, right? So
Hmm.
donation becomes donate.
Right.
Education becomes educate, but this
Uh,
isn't always the case and that's what causes errors. Like for example, conversation, right?
yeah, you can't say, as we said, really, we don't say conversate, right?
Nope, that doesn't exist.
Yes. Although I keep
Instead, it's
sometimes I think
converse.
it does because I
Converse
do
means to
hear
talk.
it. I
Because we
don't
hear
know.
it so often, it's almost
Yes.
being adopted,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
but
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
verb is actually converse. If we're going
Yes.
to converse together, we're having a conversation.
Okay, so don't just assume again that you can just drop that shin sound
Mhm.
and have the verb. It doesn't always would you say most of the time it works that way, Aubrey,
Most
or
verbs do follow that pattern usually, but there
yeah.
are exceptions. I think the two most common are, first of all, conversation, and the second one, this is a mistake I have also heard, electrification
Uh,
is not electrificate. You can't just drop that shin, but actually
yes.
electrify. So
Right.
this is a pretty common exception where sometimes you drop and have a Y instead of the "ate" ending.
Yes, interesting. And it's hard because the term electrocution and electrocute
Right.
would follow the rule, right?
Yes, so
So,
confusing. Yes, and this
different
verb I
words.
wanna share, we use it a lot because it doesn't just mean charge with electricity to electrify. We
Uh-huh.
also use it idiomatically to
Ooh.
mean, like, to cause a sense of great excitement, right? The audience was electrified by
Yeah.
the ballerina's performance, right? We
Ooh.
use it idiomatically like that too.
I'm gonna start using that word in that way. I don't use it in that way, but I should because it's great,
It
right? The
sounds
idea
very
of
high
yeah,
level and impressive.
com
I feel intelligent using that in a sentence, right?
electrified the audience. I love it. Brought them to life, got them excited. So good,
Exactly.
Aubrey.
Like a
So good.
speech can electrify an
Yes.
audience, right? This one we imagine like a buzz of excitement because something is amazing. We would
Right.
say they were electrified.
Yes, and speaking of speeches, tonight is also, in addition to it being our fluency party, it's also the first presidential debate. We're recording this at the end of June, guys.
Ooh, this is a big
So
deal.
I'm a little nervous about that, to be honest, just in
People
general.
are electrified about that, right? The anticipation, you could also
Yeah.
say that,
Yeah.
people are electrified. So
Right. Right.
we're
Okay.
focusing on ION today. So the second tip we want to share, right? We were talking about how you
Yes.
can't always drop ION.
Yeah.
You also can't always add ION. So in
Mm.
general, the
Mhm.
pattern, we add the suffix ION to many verbs in English to create their noun form. So for
Okay.
example, we take locate
Yeah.
and and we have location, or
Right.
like create, right? And then we
Creation.
have the noun
Mhm.
creation. But we don't
Okay.
do this with every verb. So this can, if you're trying to just
Ye
follow that pattern all the time, you're going to make mistakes.
Oh my gosh, I wonder what are some of the common mistakes or the ones that don't follow the pattern, Aubrey? What about the word incline?
Yes, and this is
Yeah.
what inspired this episode. I heard a student say, "We were tired because of the inclination on the hike." So they're trying to
Interesting.
take incline and add ation and think that's still a noun, but
W
inclination is actually a totally different word. So
It
let's
totally changes
define
the
both
meaning.
of these and help you
Yeah.
avoid this mistake.
Yeah, it really that's interesting. So it's
Mm,
not that you can't do it, it's just that it literally changes the meaning of the word and the context
exactly.
entirely. So just incline itself is that slope, right? How sharp is the
Exactly.
incline on the hike,
Yep, it's
right?
already a noun, right,
Mhm.
exactly. Do you
Mhm.
Lindsay, when you take a hike, do you like a sharp incline or do you prefer it to be
Uh,
gradual?
well, I know in the West we have switchbacks. In the East, we do not have switchbacks. You go
Oh,
straight up the
interesting.
mountain. They don't exist. And so that is sometimes kind of steep hiking. And so
Yes,
I can see the trade-offs. Switchbacks can be
right?
kind of painful, I think. It takes longer
Yes.
than it needs to. Do you
Takes a
feel that
long
way
time.
about Western
In
hiking?
fact, sometimes there's both options. Right here in the Tetons, there's a hike,
Ah,
Table Rock, where you're going to the top of the Grand Teton, and you can either go up the face. There is a very steep
right.
incline, or you
Yes.
can take, I think it's called Strawberry or something like that, where it's like incline, switchbacks all
Hmm.
the way up, and it takes like 4 hours longer,
Yeah. It
but it is
takes
a lot more gradual.
okay. I know sometimes it's like, how do I choose? Which one do I want? I don't know. Maybe
Exactly,
neither.
depends on how my knees feel maybe.
Yeah.
But let's go into inclination too.
Yeah.
This is a totally different word. It means the tendency to act a certain way or feel a certain way. We
Okay.
also use the words disposition or
Mhm.
propensity, right?
Yeah,
What's an
right, sort
example
of
sentence?
so, for example, I have no inclination to work today. That means I have no I'm
Desire
not moving
to
in that direction emotionally or physically or in any way. Uh,
Exactly. We might say
disposition,
desire instead, but yeah, it's like I
desire.
just don't want to act or
Yes.
feel like doing something.
Okay, so that's fascinating. So again, it's not that you can't do it, it's just that it will completely change the meaning and it won't make any sense
Exactly.
if you use inclination when you're talking about going up a mountain, okay?
Right. And there are a few other examples. One is conviction and
Uh-huh.
convict or convict. This is especially tricky. So, convict is a
Mm.
verb. That means to declare someone guilty of a crime, but spelled the same way, it's also a noun with the emphasis on the first syllable, convict, which is a
Jeez.
person found guilty of a crime.
Wow,
That's really
tricky.
tricky.
And that could actually be another episode. We could do another day,
Seriously.
words like that that are and there's a few of them. Maybe we've
There's a
talked about
lot
them
of them
before.
where with the
Yeah.
syllable
Mhm.
emphasis changing, it's a different word
Yes.
entirely.
Yes, another episode for another day. And then conviction is a formal declaration that someone is guilty of a crime, right? So what was
Yes.
their conviction? Okay.
Yes, and it has a second meaning of a firmly held belief or opinion, right? We'll
Yes.
say, "I've always had a firm conviction that everyone deserves justice."
Love it. Yes. And we know that about you, Aubrey. You've shared that before on the
That's
podcast.
true for me. I know a lot of these example sentences are like, "Meh, I might agree with this or not." This
This
one I
one?
agree
Yes,
with.
she agrees. I love it. So
Yeah,
good. All right. Okay, we are back and let's do a role play to see how this really comes to life. I think this will be the key learning piece for our listeners today, Aubrey. All right.
absolutely. All right, so
Okay.
you and I are at the beach for this role play, Lindsay.
Yay,
Wouldn't that be
fun.
nice?
Oh, it would
Yeah,
be.
I could use some beach time.
I know. Gotta love beach time. Here we go.
Mm.
So, this is quite the incline. It's hard to pull the wagon in the sand.
I need to have a conversation with my kids about staying close.
Yeah, their inclination is to wander pretty far.
Yeah, Gigi's hunting seashells. She's absolutely electrified every time she sees one.
That's awesome.
This is kind of a fun
Mm.
way to use it. Well, we'll get to it. Let's go through the whole thing and then I'll
Yeah.
share because I like using electrified this way too for just one person being excited.
Yeah, good. I feel like I have a takeaway for today to start
Nice.
using this word.
Yes.
Good. And so I said first, this is quite the incline. It's hard to pull the wagon in the sand. So it sounds like we're walking up a sand dune, like the sand dunes they
It's
have in Cape
steep,
Cod. Hmm.
which is the
Yeah.
worst trying to pull a wagon in steep sand, especially if
Ugh.
it's deep sand. Ugh.
No, no, thank
That's an
you.
arm workout.
Yes, it is for sure. And then you said,
I
I.
need to have a conversation with my kids about staying close. So this is interesting because that verb converse, we talk about
Mm,
like conversing together, having like an interesting conversation,
yeah.
but we wouldn't use it here. When I'm talking with my
No.
kids, I'm talking more about like lecturing them about what they want to do, but we do use it. We'll say, I need to have a conversation with my kids about this. And it's
Yeah.
interesting how it's sort of a different meaning. I thought about this as I wrote the role play, right? We're not
Yeah.
having like a conversation about some deep topic. I'm
Right.
actually using this word to mean like lecturing them.
That's true. That's true. And it's also important to know that conversation is so much more common.
Yes.
Converse wouldn't really feel right here and in many other scenarios. It's a
It's
much
a bit
less
more formal.
used.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's more
and less
formal.
common.
Yeah, maybe it's more about an exchange back and forth, less common for sure, right?
Exactly, right? I feel like you'll hear it when talking about politics or on the news, right? They were
Mm,
conversing about some
yeah.
serious topic, but
Yeah.
in casual conversations with friends, we would just say talk or speak or
Love
have a
it.
conversation.
Yeah, and now let's go to inclination. So yeah, their inclination is to wander pretty far. So meaning they tend to do this. Tend to want to do this. They
Yes.
lean in that direction. They usually will go far, right? Totally
Yes.
different from the physical incline dragging
Exactly.
something a wagon up the sand dunes, right?
Yes. And you might have felt like this feels a little formal for this conversation at the beach because this word also is a little less common, a little more formal. We would probably just say they tend to wander, ooh, or they have a tendency to wander.
Yeah.
Inclination is a little sort of up
Yeah.
leveled, right?
It's a little, but I don't think it's so far, in
Yeah.
another ball field. I think, I would say this, my dog has an inclination to want to play or to play more often than most dogs. I don't
Yes.
think it's
We do
totally
sometimes use it in casual
yeah,
conversation for
for
sure.
sure, for
Or we'll
sure.
say
So
like, "Oh, that's my inclination." If you're like, I
yeah,
feel like
mhm,
that's yeah,
yeah.
interesting.
And then what did you say,
I
Aubrey?
said she's absolutely electrified every time she sees one. So this is a little bit hyperbolic, a little bit I'm exaggerating, right?
Yeah,
And
oh,
I use this way sometimes too. I'm
oh,
like,
yeah,
instead of saying she's super excited, I'll
yeah,
say like she's absolutely electrified. I'm
electrified.
just exaggerating how excited she is.
Well, it's fun to be able to describe something in that
Yeah.
kind of vivid detail, paint a picture. It's very common to be hyperbolic in American English, right? We've talked
Yes.
about this on the podcast, maybe less so in British English or other forms of English. I mean, if you're in the US and you want to speak in this way, just saying big
Absolutely.
things, then do it.
Yes, yes,
Right?
and it's appropriate if, like, she is super excited about finding seashells, so this
Yeah.
is appropriate. Yes, I'm exaggerating, but if you just mean they, like, kind of like something, kind of excited, this is
Yeah.
pretty extreme to say they're electrified, so you would only use this if someone's super excited.
Right, right, for sure, for sure. What's our takeaway for today? And my takeaway is to start using a new word. What's
I
yours,
love that,
Aubrey?
right? Start using electrified, Lindsay. And mine is I feel like we just can't always trust patterns in English,
Yes.
right? A suffix like ion can't be added to every verb, and you can't remove it from every noun and expect that to be the correct verb. So we want to share that the best way to learn words with suffixes is not to memorize rules and memorize lists, but to take in a lot of English. Listen
Yeah.
to podcasts, listen to TV shows. You're going to hear so many words with suffixes used correctly, and that's how you build those patterns and just know which is correct.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to look for patterns. I think it's normal as human beings. Like I said,
For
when I
sure.
learned Arabic, I said I was desperately searching for patterns, desperately in real time before she was going to quiz me 5 minutes later, kind of panicking. The brain wants to find patterns. That's okay. Don't fight against that.
For
But
sure.
look for the patterns and then also expect the rules, which prove the pattern, right? The rule, what is that expression? Like the exception proves the rule
Right,
sometimes, right?
exactly. Yep, it's going to
Yes.
happen. You're going to find exceptions. So
Yeah.
just and don't stress about it, right?
Yeah.
Connection, not perfection.
Yeah.
Like you're going to, whether you make mistakes or not, we hear students make these mistakes all the time. Nobody cares. We understand what you are saying, and that's the most important thing.
Connection is always the most important thing here at All Ears English. I love it, Aubrey. Well, I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for bringing this great topic today to the show.
Awesome. See you next time.
All right. Have a
Bye.
good one. Bye.
You too. Bye.